Welcome to Knitting Daily, where yarn and fiber takes center stage. Join knitting expert Uni Zhang, crochet ace Kim Worker, spinning and weaving fiberista Liz Gibson, and favorite stitcher Shay Pendray. Get started with the world's most beautiful fibers and yarns. Meet trend-setting designers, improve or learn new skills, knit along with us, and make time for yarn every day.
I'm here on location with Carol Sulcoski for yarnmarket.com. She's also the author of Knitting in Hand-Painted Yarns, knitting socks in hand-painted yarns. So she's the perfect person to talk to us about using hand-painted yarns. Hi, Carol.
Hi, Kim.
Tell us about the factors. Now, what makes a yarn hand-painted? What's special about that as opposed to a general multicolored yarn?
Well, some yarns, Kim, are made with the colors applied by machine.
Okay.
Hand-painted yarns are yarns in which the color is individually applied by hand, either with a brush, by squirting it on, by dabbing it on, by an individual dyer,
as
opposed to a machine.
So it's a very special kind of yarn.
It is. It's like an artisan's yarn.
Oh, excellent. So now tell us what you have here. What are the factors that go into picking a hand-painted yarn for socks?
Okay. Well, I used to work at a yarn shop. I spent a lot of time with customers, and one problem that they had was trying to figure out how their yarn was going to behave once they got it on the needles. So what I'd like to talk about today are some things that you can do before you start knitting in order to get the best result possible with your sock yarn.
Okay.
What I've got here today are some swatches and some skeins of hand-painted sock yarn. This here is a solid colored sock yarn, and so the first thing I'm going to have you do is take a look at the colors that are in your sock yarn. Try to divide your sock yarn up into categories.
Okay.
The easiest category are the solids, right? Only one color.
Sure.
This is a perfect example of that. And with solids, the general rule is that the simpler the colors, the more complicated the pattern can be.
Okay.
So,
and that's because you'll be able to see all of those, the stitch definition is so good.
The swatch here I'm going to show you has a simple ribbing at the top and a mock cable at the bottom.
Okay. Because
there's no colors to compete with the stitch work, you can really see all of the intricate twistings and turnings of the yarn. There's no color to distract you.
Right.
So when you do simple, solid yarns, complicated patterns.
Excellent.
The exact other end of the spectrum are the multis, and this is a particularly bright multi. Some multis come in lots of bright, vivid colors, color combinations, light colors against dark colors, and I call those wild multis. This is a good example of a wild multi. And with wild multis, it's the exact opposite. Because there's a lot going on with the yarn, you want to use a very simple pattern.
Okay.
Here's the same stitch pattern shown in this swatch, and you can see there's a lot going on with the color. You've got the red, the orange, the green. At the top is the rib. It shows up pretty well. Same mock cable pattern, but you really lose a lot of the detail. It gets lost because the colors distract your eye.
So with the wild multis, you can really just let the color in the yarn do all of the work for you.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the other category are what I call muted multis. They're multis that have some color changes in them like this one, but they're pretty subtle, they're pretty harmonious. No one color jumps out at you. The colors all seem to get along pretty well.
Okay.
They're the workhorses of the hand paint world.
Okay.
You can pretty much do a lot of things with them. You can do simple patterns, you can do more complicated ones. And again, here's the same swatch. Simple ribbing, mock cable, and you can see the mock cable shows up pretty well with these, and you also get a feel for the colors.
Right.
So the first step that you should do when you're getting ready to knit a pair of socks is just do a quick analysis of the color. Do you have a solid, wild multi, multi, and then pick your pattern accordingly.
Excellent. Now what about like a self-striping type of yarn? How do you work with those?
A lot of times when people knit socks in hand-painted yarn, they're a little taken aback by something that we tend to call pooling. And this is a good example of a sock that has color pooling. Because of the way you're knitting socks in a tube, right, different areas of color end up stacking next to each other like these. They blotch or make pools of color. And some people like that. I think it's a lot of fun. The socks feel just as good on your feet, but some people don't like that. So if you're concerned about color pooling and striping and other effects, it's very easy to take a look at that. You simply undo the skein of yarn and stretch it out on the table in front of you, and take a look at how long each segment of color is. This is a good example. You can see that it has long stretches where it's just white, then there's other stretches which aren't quite so long of color.
Okay.
There's a lot of variation in the length of each color, and some of them are kind of long.
Okay.
When you have variety of length in your color segments or medium-sized lengths like this, you're going to end up with yarn that tends to pool.
Okay.
And here's a good example of it. You can see how the blues end up sitting next to each other and making these little zigzags.
Yep.
And if you flipped it over, you could even see how the white has done the same thing here.
Right.
If your repeats are really, really long, and I'll show you this one because it does it really well,
Okay.
you end up with stripes. This pretty much has 2 color repeats.
Okay.
Half the yarn is light pink and half the yarn is dark. And it pretty much ends up making stripes of light pink and dark pink like this.
And again, even though this is only 2 colors in the yarn, you might want to let the yarn do all of the work for you here because the striping
There's
will
a lot going on with the
distract
colors
from a pattern.
Exactly.
Excellent.
And if you have really small color, if each segment of color is very, very small, then you're going to end up with a sock that looks pretty much variegated. Not a lot of striping, not a lot of colors that stack up against each other, just sort of an overall muted effect.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
The projects and patterns from today's show, plus more ideas and projects, can be found on the web at knittingdailytv.com. This is show 205. Continue knitting daily every day by joining the online Knitting Daily community and receive a free newsletter 5 times a week, filled with step-by-step techniques, inspiring reader-contributed stories, and free patterns. It's about knitting all the time. knittingdaily.com.